All right. So it's been 2 years. It's hard to imagine that it's only been 2 years working with you guys. I remember going out to dinner in September of 2019, back when we weren't sure if Messari was going to work or crypto was going to work as a broader asset class. And you were both just coming in. Watkins, you were one of our original kind of volunteer analysts before we even had the money to pay people. It's worked out. And Wilson was an intern with Circle on the research team. And now I'd say you're two of the higher profile analysts within the industry. So maybe start out by just like a quick review, without shilling Messari necessarily, of like what has changed in your mind? Like what are the biggest differences today versus 2 years ago? Not necessarily in price, but in terms of maturity and some of the themes that have come to fruition that we thought might be a big thing.
Yeah, sure. So I guess when I joined, it was late 2019. We were at the tail end of the bear market, and it wasn't necessarily sure what were going to be some of the potential use cases for blockchains. I think even at that time, Bitcoin had questionable value, at least to the mass public. And I think what changed is really in early 2020 when we had COVID, and that kind of changed like the macro landscape. People started to think that Bitcoin made more sense, and Bitcoin started to attract speculation. And then I think the next thing was really just DeFi summer in the middle of 2020. And what changed there is that now not only did we have this kind of macro thesis for the asset class with Bitcoin, but now we have started to have some real growth in the applications, which at the time I think were like more theoretical before. It's like we could do all these things like DeFi and all these different applications, but there's really no usage. And then after that, I think we start to see applications and activity pick up on other blockchains, not just Ethereum. And I think now we're living in a world where there are many different blockchains, many different ecosystems that actually have like real developer interests, economic activity, real capital behind them. And I think the asset class is now actually an asset class, and the crypto economy is now a legitimate economy.
Wilson, Watkins was playing with all the apps and the NFTs and the DeFi farms, and he was playing with all the cool stuff, I guess. And then you were in the trenches on the L1s for most of DeFi summer and the fall last year. And then all of a sudden, early this year, everything just started to take off, and it became clear that we were in kind of a multi-chain world. What was the tipping point? I mean, is it just gas fees on Ethereum, or what have been the key drivers, do you think, of ultimately bringing us to this point that you have potentially half a dozen, a dozen layer 1 or layer 0 even blockchains that are going to be custom built for different use cases?
Yeah, it's crazy to think about where we are now. It's never been a more exciting time to be a layer 1 analyst, that's for sure. And when I joined 2 years ago, a lot of these chains were really in those early infantile stages. Most of them haven't launched yet, and now to see that just within that 2-year span, all of a sudden pop up, grow up, having actual applications, chains plugging into them is pretty crazy to see. But what was that catalyst to get it there? I mean, you saw all these applications popping up on Ethereum. Sure, that did play into it. A lot of users did get priced out as gas fees on Ethereum spiked. But I think the other thing is you're starting to see that there was going to be a lot of opportunity. There was definitely a lot of money put into these other chains. They raised a good amount of money. And then there were other developer communities that popping up elsewhere on Cosmos, building on the Cosmos SDK, on Polkadot, building on Substrate. And then slowly Solana kind of caught up very quickly there. And it wasn't until you actually had the infrastructure there for people to actually bridge out and go elsewhere, and have developers actually earn a living and make applications on these other networks that enabled that, without something like BSC or Polygon for these developers to launch these applications there. That step wouldn't have happened at least as rapidly as it did over the last 6 to 8 months.
When you think about some of the drivers for the rest of the year, we've obviously had a big sell-off because naturally that's what happens the first day of any conference in crypto. But there's some macro forces now that are moving the other direction. People are afraid of what's happening in China in the lending market, and whether there could be some contagion there. And you've seen how correlated crypto is and continues to be. Do you worry that that's like a great unraveling, or is the kind of underpinning of the crypto economy, these applications that have emerged, the kind of real usage, is it there beyond speculation where there's going to be a there, unlike the 2017 bubble and pop, which was a really painful couple of years? How do you kind of see if there is some macro pain that we go through, what do you think the impact will be, not just on the price, but on the pace of building within crypto? Is anything different this time? Famous last words.
Right.
Go ahead. I'm setting you up for failure.
Right. So it is a little bit different this time. So obviously you can't completely avoid macro contagion. So if things get really bad, then of course crypto will suffer. That being said, what I think is the largest difference is that you're actually seeing like real growth in this industry this time, and that will continue, I think, throughout whatever market conditions there ultimately are. I don't think if we were to go into a bear market now, it would change many different companies' plans, builders' plans. I mean, surely there would be maybe less public focus on the space, but I think at this point, I think crypto's it's a little bit more obvious at this point that these applications are going to be useful, whereas in 2017 it was really just theory, right? Like it was a bunch of white papers, and then the second the bubble popped, people were looking at this asset class and being like, all right, like what is actually here? There's nothing going on. So I think one kind of example that I'll give is during that little kind of whatever you want to call it mini bear market we had from May until really like about a month ago. There were still opportunities to make money in the markets. Not everything was correlated, so I think we're starting to see some pockets where if there is growth that is continuing throughout the market, like people can still make money, and then at the same time, people are going to continue building. Right? There were still new blockchains launching, new upgrades happening. It's actually like the ecosystem is alive, and I don't think that is the one thing that's not going to change, regardless of where the markets go.
Wilson, what do you think?
I agree. I mean, it's just completely different. You have an actual economy being built on top of these networks, unlike what you saw previously, and that's not going away. DeFi is not going away, and then you've also seen other applications really start to gain some traction, like Axie kicking off with what it did with its play-to-earn gaming. That's not going away. That was really kind of like the entrance into what are the other applications that can take off within crypto networks. Obviously, what you're seeing with NFTs, maybe there's some correlation between what's going on in NFT world with the ICO world, but again, maybe a large percentage of them might lose a lot of value, but there's going to be that top 2 to 5% that actually they're going to be around and they're going to be valuable, and people are going to continue to build around these and other use cases with NFTs and everything. So I think we have a lot of the building blocks there that enable mass use cases. Where that goes, obviously we'll have to see, but the fact that we actually have this economy being built, sure, there's a lot of speculation still involved, but you're going to start to see real value being driven towards that, as we've already seen recently with DeFi.
So be careful on NFTs, but mortgage your house for Bored Apes and punks.
Yes.
The takeaway.
Yeah.
Okay. I think the other thing for me is just the staggering amount of crypto dollars that are now circulating in the economy, number one, and then real kind of dry powder dollars that have been raised by the venture capital firms, which have just raised gobs of money. So that's definitely a difference between this market and last. And in some respects, the ICO boom was retail fueled and really in hyperdrive. You could argue that some of the earlier stage projects are getting funded more traditionally, and you're kind of starting with like a seed group of participants and kind of more active investors, whether they're funds or whether they're kind of strategic angels, and then kind of scaling internally and then kind of coming to market when they're ready. The upshot, at least for me, is that smart money is not going to panic sell. And they can't. They're structurally not able to. So it maybe creates a little bit more stability, not necessarily in price, but in terms of the pace of development and building. I challenge you guys backstage to not be so buddy-buddy and like actually figure out what you disagree on. Were you able to find anything that you disagreed on?
I think we did.
A little bit.
All right.
Somewhat.
All right. Fire away.
Okay. So.
Or just play devil's advocate. Let's keep it a little spicy this morning so people don't think this is just a hug fest to start out.
All right, we'll play devil's advocate.
Okay.
All right. So we're increasingly living in a multi-chain world. Much more of the excitement and interest in capital is now flowing on-chain, right? So we're seeing increased usage on Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, Terra, right? Like these booming economies. There's so many different ways to be productive with your capital on these blockchains as well. And also, there's increasingly new ways to move value between these blockchains. So now you're getting some cross-chain composability, which I think is going to unlock a bunch of new utility for the industry as a whole. But I think seemingly left out of this conversation, at least on-chain, is Bitcoin. So I guess to play devil's advocate here would be, does Bitcoin have or what is Bitcoin's role in an increasingly on-chain, multi-chain world, where Bitcoin is kind of left out? No one's really using it on-chain that much. What do you think about that?
So I think a lot of it relates back to the kind of like the community around Bitcoin and how accepting they are to other chains and going out there. But and it almost seems like it's kind of fading off into irrelevancy and everything that's going else out there. And it's kind of easy to fall into that trap. But you have to remember that Bitcoin's still the largest, the highest value network out there. There's a lot of capital locked up in there. And if you can find some way to get that out, and what are those applications that can really bring Bitcoin out? Is it something like Thorchain where you can start earning a yield on your Bitcoin there, putting it to work? Is it going to be something else that you're not just able to like bridge Bitcoin, but able to build stuff that interacts with Bitcoin? There's just too much value being held there for it to just live in isolation. Someone's going to figure something out to able to bring that there. So it's going to happen, but I think there's definitely a high barrier to entry there.
I'll pick up on something that I've talked about in a few different interviews that's stolen from Arthur Hayes from BitMEX. And I know I've mentioned it to you guys. I'm curious to hear what you think about the thesis that you can actually think about Bitcoin as the M0 or the gold market cap, and then you can think about all these other, Ethereum, Layer 1, DeFi, kind of the rest of the industry essentially as tech companies, right? For lack of a better framing. And if you look at where we are now, they're both about $6 trillion, $7 trillion, $8 trillion in kind of total value. So I've said I think that the most entertaining outcome is the one that I'm rooting for, which is just that the flippening never actually happens. It's just a perpetual game of Bitcoin dominance around like 45 to 50% and everybody yelling past each other. Do you think that Bitcoin will continue to be relevant as the predominant asset and the entry point to the industry? Or do you think that we're entering a market where we do see a flippening or multiple flippenings and people put more value on these decentralized networks? Because I don't want to get into pure price speculation, but I think it's important just to help people understand where we are in like the sentiment cycle for Bitcoin versus everything else.
Yeah. So I think Bitcoin dominance likely continues to decrease, and I think that's just a function of the asset class growing. That being said, I don't think Bitcoin necessarily loses relevance. I just think that the market participants start to get more just hip on like what's going on in this industry, right? So that people I think it starts to almost like fragment how people are thinking about these assets. So by that I mean people who are interested in Bitcoin are more like macro focused, whereas maybe people who are interested in Ethereum and all these other smart contract platforms are more kind of like growth-oriented investors. So they still like coexist. It's just that they're almost like, just like how we don't compare, gold dominance over equity markets. Like we're just not going to do the same thing with I think Bitcoin and the rest of the asset class. Now I think one nuance I will say is that I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Bitcoin will be the digital gold of this industry. It certainly is like the most likely candidate, which is obviously reflected in the kind of the valuation. But I mean, people are storing $400 billion in ETH right now, right? And that's not because they believe it's just going to be some giant tech platform that captures fees. It's because there is some sense that what people are pricing in is that it's going to retain some kind of monetary premium. And in that world, especially as the crypto economy, the native crypto economy grows, and one of these smart contract platform assets becomes a primary store of value in this kind of digital economy, then maybe you do start to question Bitcoin's dominance or position as digital gold. But we'll see. I think maybe there's always going to be a community of people who are just never going to sell their Bitcoin, who are always going to be only Bitcoin, and that's just how it's going to be. It's fragmented.
I don't know if you see what Watkins just did there when he said that people will get hip to the layer 1 applications and everything else, essentially calling me a boomer for my long-time Bitcoin maximalism. Wilson, where do you come out on this? At least I disagree with you guys on something, but
yes.
maybe you're on the same page.
Trying to find a point that Watkins and I disagree on, but it's kind of hard to argue the fact that you're going to start to see some of these layer 1 coins, what's going on with Ethereum could happen elsewhere, where people looking to deploy their capital start seeing this as a store of value, looking at the properties involved. But then the fact that you have that added utility to it, that I can deploy this on various applications, I can earn yield on it, I can stake it and continue to earn my share of the network, and that's just that added utility. I've kind of always looked at this like store of value plus utility is going to be greater than just a store of value. It's kind of been the thesis, and that's what has led me to kind of come to the conclusion that it's hard to see some sort of smart contract platform not becoming the most valuable network at some point. Does Bitcoin fade to irrelevance? Kind of hard to say that just because it has such a tight-knit community, but you start seeing that at least like new people coming in, new entrants, getting excited about what's going on, they're going to start onboarding onto new platforms over learning about Bitcoin and going in that direction first.
I want to do a quick lightning round between the two of you because I do want to talk a little bit about Hub and Enterprise before we wrap up. So top 3 themes, there's 4 months, 3.5 months left in 2021. What are you looking at the next few months? Because it really does feel like we're at an inflection point in the cycle and it could go either direction.
Yeah, so I don't know if I necessarily have 3. I just think I just have one major theme, which is just cross-chain composability. So everything related to, I think the theme of this conversation is that we have so many different blockchains that are now having, serious economic activity. But for the most part, like it's kind of like this patchwork framework for how do these blockchains talk to each other, right? If you want to go to Solana to Ethereum, you use like Wormhole, and Ethereum to Avalanche, use the Avalanche bridge, and it's just all over the place. But I think like what we're going to see over the next 6 to 12 months is that we do start to get some really it's like quality and kind of standardized ways of kind of communicating across these different ecosystems. And I think, like I said, I think this is going to unlock a lot of value for these ecosystems, and also I think allow them to both compete and then also cooperate more. So that's the biggest theme I'm looking at. Obviously there's it has important implications I think for investors, of course, because there's opportunity to kind of play this theme. But also I think for builders, researchers, and everyone else in this industry as well. Like when you think about what does this mean for your application that's living on a single chain when we're going to a multi-chain world? How do you kind of position yourself to take advantage of it? There's like different strategies that you can employ. And then also I think for businesses as well, like how do you get data for all these different chains? Like right now, like really the only chain you can get quality data for is Ethereum, right? But that's increasingly becoming like a less and less, you don't get the full picture just from Ethereum anymore. So yeah, that's I think just the one theme that I think captures everything that I'm looking for.
He took the one that you were going to say because you agree on everything, but what would you have as your number 2?
But you can add to that. Like obviously cross-chain composability is like the main aspect of like how do we actually connect these chains, move between them. But there's also other infrastructure there, and I think there's a great piece that came out maybe like 3 years ago now on the application and infrastructure cycles and how they impact each other and how you need that base infrastructure to allow the next cycle of applications to really kind of take over and rise up. And cross-chain composability is one, but you're starting to see other ones come into play. You have all these different chains popping up. How do you make it easier to do so? And how do you give them the security to get there? And that's where shared security layers, whether that be like what the Cosmos Hub is doing, what Polkadot's Relay Chain is setting up. Even Avalanche's core networks are looking to do the same to support subnets. And then on top of that, data availability layers. Could be another one that would allow some sort of communication, but would allow chains to scale and almost launch roll-ups, in a sense, off of these base layers that would allow them to scale more easily and communicate more easily. So there's opportunities out there in this multi-chain world where they're kind of like the infrastructure plays, almost like the pick and shovel type plays.
Wilson, this sounds really complicated. Are there any tools available that can help people track what's going on as these protocols get upgraded and develop over time?
That's funny you ask.
Okay.
That's funny you ask. Yeah. So we have a couple of tools in house, and we kind of developed these over years of research and looking at what's going out there, how these other chains are looking and thinking. And so obviously one of the tools that present out there was our Intel tool, and that's how we track over 200 assets right now. So anything that's going on, from a major protocol upgrade to an economic change to governance votes. And that was kind of like our base product. And then there are many other different products that we can build off of that, including how do you track governance votes a little more closely. Because especially as we go into this multi-chain world, that's going to get more and more difficult. What's going on between these different chains? How do I actually know, can I vote from a single user interface? And that's kind of things that we have been looking into.
If you're a protocol specialist in the audience, definitely want to check out our booth and make sure that you chat a little bit more with Wilson. Watkins, I'm going to give you the last word. As one of our volunteer analysts early on, who worked and grinded with us in 2018 when we were first starting the foundation, didn't ultimately get paid, then you joined us finally, and we changed that. What would you say to folks about the hub, and maybe even like the analysts that are tuning in virtually, that are thinking about how to break into this industry? What's the value kind of across the board for participating in the hub, either as a member, an analyst, or someone that's going to sponsor coverage?
Yeah, so I think one of the best ways to just get into this industry, as a non-technical person, is just to write and share your thoughts. I think that's one thing I definitely got from you. And I think really what it is like writing is two things. It's one, just a way of learning, which I think in this asset class, it's so easy to just read and consume information, and it's like really complex, and not actually synthesize it in your head, which I think kind of leaves like holes in your learning. So that's definitely one part of it. It's just like it's a great opportunity to learn. You work with like the team at Messari as well, who will review your work, which is like very active as well. And also you get to meet people in the community as well who are also looking to learn, looking to get into the industry, have connections in the industry. And yeah, I think besides that, it's just being able to build your brand, right? So you publish your work through us. I mean, Messari has pretty massive distribution channels, both with our newsletter, Twitter. We have pretty wide reach. And yeah, if like you're writing quality stuff, like you'll get noticed. And we've already had many people from the research hub, both like in the old version where it was just like the completely volunteer one to now, that have now got on to work at like the top crypto funds, exchanges. I mean, really just you get what you put into it. So I think it's an incredible opportunity.
Watkins started with us with 8 Twitter followers. 8. That's a single digit. What do you got now?
Like 39, okay.
Give or take. So, young analysts that are watching online, that want to break into the industry, that need an excuse to get paid and learn from a community for what you're already doing anyway, definitely check out the hub, check out Enterprise. We're going to wrap here. Thank you guys for joining and setting the table for this conversation. All right, onward.